Hello, how are you doing? Thanks for joining me again. It is miserable out there today, so miserable that I really cannot face going out to shoot a video. But instead, rather than leave you in suspense, I'm going to do what I think secretly you've been wanting me to do for a while, which is talk you through all the cameras that I've used in my lifetime, starting in the 1970s all the way up to when I started this channel, because from then on you've seen them, I think. So what we will do is start with the very first one, which I think I probably picked up in about 1975. So the first camera that I ever used was actually the Agfamatic 100 sensor, and it belonged to my parents. I won't go into any more detail about it because I am planning to do a video specifically about this camera, but that was the first one that I used. The second camera that I used, and the first camera that I owned, was a disc camera. And that was a Boots own brand disc camera, and I did a video about that earlier this year, so you can look that up. I'll put a link to it. The next camera that I had was a 35mm point and shoot. I think it was a Helena, I can't remember the exact brand, but it was a simple 35mm compact camera. It had no focusing and it took pretty mediocre pictures. Around this time, I actually inherited from my grandfather, who is probably the person I got my love of photography from, a Voigtlander rangefinder camera, which was lovely, but unfortunately I had no idea how to use it. It was fully manual, it had a light meter separate to it, and I had no one who could explain it to me. My dad didn't understand how it worked, and I lusted after the Zenit 35mm SLR, which was in the chemist window of my hometown. And that's a version of that I did a video about earlier this year as well, which was the Moscow Olympics version, and trying to get something out of that. So watch that video as well if you are interested in finding out more about that camera. After that, it was pretty much disposable cameras for the next few years. I wasn't really into photography anymore. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I was making films with VHS camcorders, and still images sort of went by the wayside. And it was only when I started my first proper career as a journalist that I got back into photography, because I was working with photographers on a day-to-day basis. And I think I learned a lot from those photographers. The cameras they were using were Canon EOS SLRs of various complexities depending on who they were working for, but it got me feeling that SLRs were the way to go. And I got a Praktica SLR, which was my go-to camera for quite a while after that, and that was completely manual focusing, but it was automatic metering, which was the thing that was always getting me. I took that camera with me to Venice and to lots of other destinations that I went to on holidays, and I started to try and develop an eye and take pictures for the sake of taking pictures rather than just to immortalise a moment with friends or family. So that Praktica, loved that camera, but the focusing was an issue with it, as was the focusing with the rangefinder camera that I bought later on, which was the Yashica Electro 35, which I was using all the way up until I started this channel. And I think my first video was using that camera. It's pretty much broken now, but it's lasted a long time. But again, it had the issue with focusing. It was slow to focus. It was manual to focus. And I really wanted something faster than that. Now, around this time, digital cameras were starting to make an appearance. And my first digital camera was a Fuji Finepix 1300, and that seemed like it was all I was ever going to need. And it used smart media cards, which were defunct fairly soon after. You could view what you'd done to see the results. This was a time when it wasn't common to be able to see an instant result unless you had a Polaroid camera. And speaking of Polaroid cameras, that was another camera that I got about this time, which was the Polaroid camera that I did one of my earlier videos on. Again, I will link to that, but that camera I still have. It's still fully operational because the battery pack is part of the film cartridge rather than the camera. Now, where was I? I was talking about digital cameras. So yes, I first of all had this Fuji Finepix 1300, fixed focus, fixed angle lens, just pressed the button and you got a picture. It was magical to be able to take as many pictures as you wanted to take. Obviously, you had to clear the card between them, but it wasn't costing you any money. You weren't having to buy film. Yeah, I'd forked out a fair amount for this digital camera because every digital camera was expensive. And there weren't phone cameras, so digital cameras opened my eyes to the fact that I could take pictures whenever I wanted. I could take risks with pictures thinking, oh, well, if it doesn't come out, it doesn't matter. If it's a rubbish picture, it doesn't matter. It's not costing me. I've not used up the film. I can just delete it and start again. And I thought this was probably the camera that I was going to use for the rest of my life. How little I knew, I'd probably spent tens of thousands of pounds on cameras since that point. But that was the start of my, I'm not sure love affair is the correct word, but my relationship with digital cameras. I decided that I was going to upgrade. I had a bit of a health scare and I thought I'm going to treat myself to a digital camera and that will distract me from the issues that I've got, which fortunately turned out not to be serious. But I did end up with the Minolta D-Image, and this ran on AA batteries. I think there were 4 AA batteries that went into this one, and they lasted about a minute. It was literally, you got a couple of shots and the camera was dead. Putting rechargeables in did increase it. The technology has moved on dramatically, and I think we forget that it wasn't just storage media and sensor quality that was an issue in the old days. It was just battery life. Digital things didn't work particularly well in the old days because battery life was so poor. It's like laptops would last hardly any time at all. You had a mobile phone, you made one phone call on it and it was dead. So never underestimate the importance of batteries. But yeah, so I got the Minolta D-Image and the quality leap was dramatic. I was amazed at the quality of this, and it even had aperture priority, shutter priority. Of course, at the time, I didn't really understand that wasn't a lot of point in having aperture priority when the depth of field was pretty much infinite because the sensor was so microscopically small. It took almost a second to focus on something, and if the contrast of the scene wasn't great, it struggled even more. But I did get some really nice pictures with it. And again, I was able to experiment. So I was loving digital at this point. But the only thing that I wasn't loving about it was the speed of the focusing. And so I kind of went back to film as well as keeping digital. I bought myself a Canon EOS film camera, which would take the lenses of people that I knew who had other Canon EOS cameras, more sophisticated ones. This jump in focusing speed was massive and it completely revolutionized my photography. Also, I was using a massive, what you would call sensor. The film was full frame. So I was able to start using depth of field in a way that I hadn't before. Because although I'd had a 35mm camera in the past, the Praktica, they were all kit lenses with very narrow apertures, and I didn't really understand how it worked. So I was still learning. But this gave me the opportunity to shoot. It came with a 50mm lens, f1.8 I think it was. It was the standard lens. And so you could actually start taking proper pictures with it. And I enjoyed doing that. The cost of the film was an issue. But again, this was back in the day when if you took your film to be developed, the lab gave you another film to go away with to keep you in the cycle. Pretty much always the quality of the film was awful, but I was getting the composition experience and, you know, they were perfectly adequate as snaps. Then moving on from that, the big leap came when the Canon 10D was released. And that was the first proper digital camera that I had. It did everything the EOS 500 would do, and it was digital. So I had then the ability to take as many pictures as I wanted and all the attributes of the film. It was a crop framed camera. It was APS-C as I remember, but it was still pretty amazing, pretty remarkable. And I took lots of great pictures with that camera, and I upgraded to the 20D and I took lots of great pictures with that. And then I went professional. I got myself the Canon EOS 1DS, the dream camera. In fact, I think it was the 1DS Mark II, and it was massive. It weighed a ton. I couldn't lift it now, especially with the lenses that I got to go with it. I got myself a 24-70 and a 70-200, and I got a couple of speed lights so I could do off-camera flash, and the quality was amazing. Full frame,
And I thought, as I'd thought many times before, I would never need another camera because it seemed to do everything. But as we all know, as time goes on, there is always more that it can do, more frames per second, higher megapixels, wider dynamic range, better color science, customized options, stabilization, all these things that come in. And then, of course, video. The next camera I got was the Canon 5D Mark II, and I still have that camera to this day. It's what I use to scan my negatives. It's what I take out with me when I haven't got the Lumix with me, which I'll go into in a minute. And it's full frame, it takes all the EF lenses, and it's rugged, it's dependable, it's never let me down. And the resolution is probably still all that you would actually require for all but the most spectacular work. Speaking of resolution, I also started shooting medium format film for my beekeeper project, which I've talked about before. I started off, I had a Bronica 645 camera, and I took that to Croatia with me on a holiday, and I had fun with that. But the professional stuff I shot on a Mamiya RB67, and I've still got that as well. The next camera that I got, the GF1, which was a Lumix, Panasonic Lumix camera, and that was great for carrying around to evenings out. I had a little Pancake 20mm lens, which I still have on the newer Lumix. It also shot video. It was only 720p video, but it did shoot video, so I could make little movies of my trips away as well. And I made many little weekend away videos, which I put on my own personal channel for my friends to see. That camera I then passed on, and I got a successor to that, which is the Lumix G100, which was actually a gift to me from my wife as a birthday present. It has got quirks. The battery life was terrible on it, and I had to find workarounds for various things, but I did, and it's been a brilliant camera. Which reminds me of one camera that I forgot to mention because I only had it very briefly, but I think it's now kind of a classic, and it's a Ricoh GR. It was the original one, and it had a tiny sensor, but it was really pocketable. It was great for street photography, except that it was quite slow to start up, focus, etc., etc. Now there are Ricoh's GR3, I think it is, or something, which is apparently a brilliant street photography camera, and I would like to try out. But yeah, I had that camera for a while, and that was a great little pocket camera. I think I gave that away to my girlfriend at the time's brother as a gift, so I hope he got some good use out of it.
Another camera which I had, which I forgot to mention, was the Canon 1DX Mark II, which of course is a fantastic camera, and I got it when I was hoping to restart a freelance career, but when that flagged, it had to go, so I won't go into that in any more detail. It was a great camera, but not one that I really got the true value out of.
The G100 was the last sort of camera that I bought before I started this. Sorry, didn't even buy, I was given it before the channel started, and you know everything from then on, so I won't go into any more detail. But yeah, that's the history of my cameras to date. The one I've loved the most, probably the G100, having hated it to start with. Sorry, Lucy, but you know that when you got it me, I was probably really ungrateful, but actually I'm incredibly grateful now. It just took me a little while to realise it. It's a great camera, and it's done everything and more, taken some great pictures with it. In terms of film cameras, I think the Yashica Electro. Now my favourite film camera, is the Olympus XA2, but I got that after I started the channel, and this video is just covering the cameras that I had before.
So there you go, a brief history of my cameras. I probably missed a couple out, and there are obviously the more recent ones which you will have seen on the channel anyway. But those are the cameras that I spent most of my life with. Hopefully there will be many more that I will get to try before I depart. But that's it for this week. Please do subscribe, like, share, tell your friends. That would really help me out. Enjoy whatever you're shooting. Take care, and bye for now.